Well, good evening, everyone.
Good
evening.
For those of you in the room, just a reminder that this microphone hears all. So if you start muttering about that awful pastor up front, it's going to know it.
That's okay, I'll turn it off.
But welcome. Let me introduce to you, in case you don't know him, this is Steve Sample, member of our congregation. He's put together quite a thought piece for us this evening. Based and connected to the life and example of George Washington, but speaks to a much wider group of issues than simply Washington himself. So yeah, I'm certain it'll be thought-provoking for you. Right? But let's begin with prayer, shall we? The Lord be with you. Let us pray. Oh Lord God, we thank you again for bringing us together as congregation, as members of Christ's family, his brothers and his sisters. This evening, we consider the work of our brother Steve, and we ask your blessings on him for his hard work and his scholarship. And Lord God, we ask that you send your spirit upon all of us, that we may consider the things that are put before us and thoughtfully share our experiences and our impressions of the world as it is and as the world as it used to be. And then, Lord, commit us to bringing this world to a place that you would have it to be as we go forth, taking the love and the gospel of Jesus Christ into the world. In Jesus' name. Amen. Steve, I turn it to you.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for coming out on what's going to be a chilly evening. Might even have some snow because this doesn't get out till 12, you know.
Well, long-winded, are you?
But no, I do appreciate you coming out, and as Pastor Mark noted, I do incorporate George Washington in this talk. I tie it into Eric Metaxas' 2 books that this church had the wisdom to do long Bible studies on. And I think for this day and age is most appropriate. And with that said, because I got a couple of slides here coming up, gonna be talking to about Eric. Now there is Mr. Eric Metaxas there on the left. And as I said, I'm trying to connect the dots for some of you between Metaxas George Washington and what I call his present darkness hovering over a country. Now, Metaxas is said to have written the definitive biography on Bonhoeffer, that great Lutheran pastor in Hitler's Germany, and who Hitler had hung just right at the end of the war. So in order to write such a biography, don't you know that Metaxas had to study in depth the Third Reich in order to put all the pieces together, all the complex things that were going on in Nazi Germany, and link them together with Bonhoeffer, the other people around him, and even to the point of where they tried to assassinate Hitler. So anyhow, these are the 2 books, Religiousness, Christianity, and Letter to the American Church. It was just my humble opinion, if you wanted to start out with one book, get the Letter to the American Church, the blue one.
Right.
And now, you have to understand, these 2 books are a wake-up call for the church. Okay, I quoted Matthew 11:7, and these are Jesus's words pertaining to John the Baptist. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? He was referring to maybe John the Baptist, hellfire and damnation preaching at times, or his rough, coarse persona. That's what I take that to mean. More or less, this is what to expect out of him. Now with Metaxas, I have right there in the lower left-hand corner, don't shoot the messenger. Because I'm gonna show you some stuff that is on the Amazon website, and this is a description of Metaxas's books and him. Also, right along with that, as we go more into it, maybe some of my personal biases will show through. So don't shoot me either. Okay? So now, again, I can tell I am sure all of you are long time Christians. So please don't be offended by what I'm going to read to you. Don't be offended. I'm sure it doesn't apply to anyone here, but you may have friends in the church or other churches. Or maybe you might even say to yourself, well, am I really doing all that I can? Because this is hard stuff he has to say. Okay, and I think this might be part Amazon's writing, maybe part his, but I'm gonna start on the left, that paragraph that begins with silence. Silence in the face of evil is evil, is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us guiltless. So that's why I put, don't shoot the messenger. I don't think Metaxas is trying to make anybody feel guilty. It's a wake-up call. Second paragraph. Turning the other cheek does not mean standing by while the enemies of God dismantle Christian civilization and brainwash our children. Decrying the cowardice that masquerades as meekness, Eric Metaxas summons the church to battle. An attenuated and unbiblical faith based on what Bonhoeffer called cheap grace has sapped the spiritual vitality of millions of Americans. And there he's pretty much calling out American Christians of every denomination. Paying lip service to an insipid evangelism, they shrink from combating the evils of our time. Metaxas refutes the pernicious lie that fighting evil politicizes Christianity. Probably a lot of you, and that's why he did it. Probably a lot of you are aware that, and I'm going to address this specifically, that, sometimes most of us are so hesitant to express a political view in church to other church members in fear that they're going to become offended, right? Yeah. And there's a history behind this. Uh-huh. And there's also a newer history that we don't have to, we certainly, our ministers and the laity do not have to fear that anymore. Okay? So, to speak of these things is not to politicize Christianity. It's to make us aware, it's to give us information so that we can be wise voters. We can know what the times are about. As Bonhoeffer and other heroes of the faith insisted, the church has an irreplaceable role in the culture of a nation. It is our duty to fight the powers of darkness, especially on behalf of the weak and the vulnerable, right? That's one of the things we're charged with. Nobody has a problem with that. Silence is not an option. God calls us to defend the unborn, to confront the lies of cultural Marxism, and to battle the globalist tyranny that crushes human freedom. Confident that this is his fight, the church must overcome fear and enter the fray armed with the spiritual weapons of prayer, self-sacrifice, and love. I mean, this all says a whole lot. I mean, if you wonder why sometimes people in our country, I like to say, we see white and they see black. why is there such a diversity of viewpoints? Well, so much of it comes from our worldviews. Everyone here has a worldview. There's a God. There's a God who listens and hears prayers. The other people who don't know God, who don't have a personal relationship with God, that's why they can support abortion. Why not? It's just a little hunk of flesh. That's why they can support a whole bunch of stuff that by definition is evil. Evil from the Bible, from the scripture. We don't have to make it up. It's right there in the Bible. You read it and you know this is evil. But they don't have the Bible, right? So they go by their own circle of friends, what they have been taught in the college or university. So Tim back there, myself, we like history. And one of the most important aspects of history, past, is don't forget it. So George Santayana, a Spanish philosopher, wrote in his 1905 book, 1905, The Life of Reason, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Right.
Right.
And that picture right there, that's the chancellery during the last day of Berlin when the Soviet soldiers came in and finally took Berlin and did away with the Third Reich. And obviously you see all the destruction there.
Yeah.
And see, this is one of the things that Metaxas came to the conclusion after doing the biography on Bonhoeffer that led him to write these two books. He saw this really scary parallel between the early rising of Hitler and the Nazis and what's going on in America today and Europe. That alarmed him. And it pushed him to wake up the Christian church. Let's not repeat what happened in Germany before and during World War II.
Yeah.
That would be a good thing, right? Who wants to go through something like that? Huh. So anyhow, Hitler was vastly charismatic. And here you can see a lot of young admirers. Good man. A man to be respected, trusted, and followed. But was he? Here's some of his highfalutin accomplices. Anybody know that fella on the left with all the kids? That's Joseph Goebbels. That was Hitler's propaganda minister. My goodness, the Third Reich, they had a whole big division spewing out all types of propaganda that almost called Hitler the new Messiah and all the wonderful things he did. It's quite an amazing machine. And you look around in the United States today, we have our own propaganda mills today.
Yeah.
They spread lies. They're not telling the truth, they're spreading lies. One of the things as Christians we have to arm ourselves with is discernment. We got to learn how to separate the lies from the truth. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's so many lies out there. Huh. The guy on the right, who's that?
Heinrich Himmler.
Yeah, that's Heinrich Himmler. He was an architect of the final solution with a couple other people. Oh my. These two were bad people. Now, this right here, I saw a few years back on a video on YouTube. And the whole video was about, this is when the last days of Berlin, Hitler had this fancy underground bunker. He actually spent 103 days in that bunker before he shot himself, before he knew the end had come. And at some point in time, he came out of the bunker. They had lined up all these Those are young boys, aren't they?
Yeah.
Huh? And you know what he was doing? You see this in the video. He goes up to each boy, he caresses their cheek. He caresses their cheek, he looks in their eyes, he pats them on the back, and there's no audio with it, but I can just see him whispering in their ears. Good man, good boy, we're gonna win this yet. Big lie. He was sending them to the Russian meat grinder.
Yeah.
Who's that guy?
Bilbo?
Goering.
All right.
That's the chief of the Luftwaffe. Okay, and on the right, that picture right there, that's him in his younger days, and that's a Reichsmarschall baton. Oh, it was encrusted with jewels and everything. Very rare. Hitler didn't give them out just to anybody. He was a potent force in the early years of the war. Later on, I believe because of drug addiction and other problems, he became less effective. But all four of those men I just pointed out, they all died by suicide at the end of the world, and even those children. So let's leave Nazi Germany and focus on today's situation and their origins. So Metaxas has written 2 books which he attempts to answer the questions of origin. And as I've already pointed out, I think in a nutshell, his conclusion is that church writ large has vacated the public political arena. Why is this? If you go back and read colonial history, all of them churches, were not quiet about how we must deal with the redcoats in Britain. They were not quiet. Why is it that if you can walk into 90% of the churches and start talking about whatever politician, people would have just kind of leave you, escape, huh? They look at you as some type of a freak. We can't do that. So I believe it comes about because American people have swallowed one of the biggest lies in American history. It's this so-called myth, a separation of church and state. You've all heard it, right?
Right.
You all have heard it.
Yep.
Well,
Right.
this has come about because for decades, we've been hearing the same thing. We've been hearing the same thing within our churches, within our schools, within our society. There is this great wall of separation between church and state, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's a big lie because first of all, the full intent of thinking of along those lines was what? It wasn't to keep the moral principles of Christianity out of the public sector. It was to prevent Congress from making a state-ordained church like in Europe, right?
Yep.
I think it would all be against that.
Right.
These early, tremendously gifted founders, they didn't want no Church of the United States that everybody would have to show allegiance to and who would have to pay and support. That was how all that started out, and it just got twisted. One of the biggest twisters in our country is the ACLU.
Yeah.
I mean, on the upper right part of that slide, for decades, the ACLU have had people that run around the country that come into some small God-fearing town, okay? And on that town, those people might have some type of Christian symbol, mostly around Christmas time, but on a public lawn, library, school, city hall. And all of a sudden, they go berserk. Oh my gosh, that's not supposed to be there. We have to have separation between church and state. So they go and contact their closest ACLU they got all these lawyers pro bono and they write these nasty letters to the school board, to the town council, and it scares them to the churches because they have deep pockets, right?
Yeah.
Deep pockets. So in 1954, Johnson even went further with the Johnson Amendment to strengthen this notion of a separation between church and state. Well, a lot of people don't realize it, but this really, in the past 20, 30 years, this has not been an entirely Republican challenge goal to repeal the Johnson Amendment. Now, first one, the wall of separation between church and state is a metaphor based on bad history. William Rehnquist, a one-time Supreme Court judge, right? Head of the Supreme Court. And this surprised me in researching this. I didn't know Ed Kennedy said that. The separation of church and state did not mean an absolute separation between moral principles and political power. It can't mean that. I mean, every time, I think when Congress meets in session or at different times, there's a prayer said, is it not?
Yes, so
Yes.
far.
Yes.
It is. Call upon God for wisdom. This is in Congress, and then we as citizens are supposed to think in our churches. We cannot bring up moral evils that are legislated by our government. We are somehow supposed to not even consider that? No, that's wrong. So this past summer, the Johnson Amendment was pretty much done away with. The Supreme Court, they dismissed it, sent the word to the IRS, and now ministers who endorse political candidates shouldn't lose tax exempt status, IRS says in the filing. Well, guess what? That was kind of a surprise to me. They can actually endorse a political candidate from the pulpit. That's more than I ever thought would happen.
Yeah, I know.
I think that's accurate. You know, you're quite welcome to, you don't have to challenge it right now, but you can make a note and come up to me later or go to Pastor Mark. That sample fellow, boy, he will sure off lost in this one area, okay? But I believe that is right. And I tell you, one thing I do know, that with the doing away the Johnson Amendment, they don't really want to see Faith Lutheran up there before election have a Republican headquarters stand or Democratic headquarters stand. They're not talking about that. They're saying that we can speak for and against political candidates based upon our reading of the Bible, a moral interpretation thereof, right? And that's the way it should be. Absolutely the way it should be. Mark.
Don't disagree with you, but let me put a practical element on this. The Johnson Amendment, which isn't an amendment, that's a nickname, was passed, as Steve said, in 1954. Put that in context. I was born in 1955. So literally, for my whole life, this has been the thinking of everybody in the church and making effect upon the church. It's affected the way pastors are taught in the seminary of how to say things, what to say, what not to say. Literally, none of us who wear funny collars know how to effectively go into a pulpit and suddenly throw off the shackles of the Johnson Amendment and go preach. Very few, if any, of our council members in churches writ large know how to adjudicate a church under these circumstances. We're all in uncharted territory. So it's not gonna be like throwing a switch and all of a sudden it's a brave new world. It is a brave new world, but we don't know how to live in it. We gotta figure that out. It's gonna some fits and starts as we do.
And the problem is the IRS would go after churches in the past.
Up until this summer,
Until this
absolutely.
summer, yeah.
But you know, we have freedom. Remember Braveheart? Freedom! That's what we have.
Yeah, but look what happened to him.
Yeah, that's right. Well, guess what? And this isn't Metaxas's point. If, as I pointed out, non-believers, they don't have a worldview that leads them to looking at a baby in a mother's womb as something valuable. That's why abortion came about.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a bunch of cells. It's a growth. Oh, I've heard it described as a growth, you know, it's not valuable. All right. So
I get what Pastor Mark is saying, and I understand that. But isn't there somebody that's gonna have the courage one day to get up and speak the truth?
well, I think it's
Charlie Kirk.
yeah.
Well, Charlie
There
Kirk,
was.
and there's churches here in Albuquerque that.
There are a few.
And I'm gonna-
Few.
They're beginning. to
And ma'am, I'm
Yeah.
gonna have a slide
too.
just on that, okay? And on Charlie Kirk, boy, we lost an important advocate for free speech and God.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Yep. So you see, from a biblical perspective, as some Christians have a problem with forcing the concept of transgenderism on young people in schools, we are absolutely allowed to speak out against it. And the same thing with abortion. And if you notice, both of those slides and poster, they're funded by the ACLU. So what I am about, I must tell you, I'm trying to start up an awareness amongst Christians within Christian churches. And I sure would like to, at some point in time, be able to find a common area where we all can agree on. I think that's really important because we have so many differences, but look at what it's doing to our country. All this uncivility, divisiveness, that's not helping our country. And we got to start having dialogue. We have to have the courage to talk to one another, to talk to other Christians and other churches. What do you think about this? What does your church advocate on this? Right?
Yeah.
You got to talk. So this is what I put in here. These are Democrats I happen to admire. RFK, JFK, Martin Luther King, Jimmy Carter. Right in the middle. I so believe in that. Country before party. I believe that. I think Democrats could have and have had in the past good ideas, same as Republicans. And I don't mind taking good Democratic values, good Republican values, and vote that way. I think, at least for myself, that's my golden rule.
Yeah.
Right there. Country before party. Now, did you know Ronald Reagan was a Democrat
Yeah.
Yeah.
for about 50 years?
Yeah.
I remember this saying, I didn't leave the Democratic Party, it left me,
Yeah.
right? And these days, you would think there'd be a whole bunch of people exiting the Democratic Party, because I'm going to point out the Democratic Party has been taken over by leftists.
Yeah.
Cultural Marxists. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. Look at who the new mayor of New York City is. Oh,
Seattle.
I got a picture of him. So anyhow, in his early years, George Washington earned some money by being a surveyor. poor old George, he was not sent off to England to some of these highfalutin schools for young men or women. He didn't have much of an education, and he always felt sad about that, but he was, I believe, a highly intelligent person, because in order to become a surveyor, you have to at least know trigonometry.
Mm.
And I took trig in high school. And to apply the principles of trigonometry, plus the somewhat crude instruments they had at that time, that's a real feat, man.
Mm.
You know, to sketch out this plot accurately at different pieces of land. So I credit that to him. So in 1776, when all this stuff was happening in our country, boy, we sure needed a leader. You know, and look at what God gave us. Thomas Jefferson said Washington was the greatest horseman of his age. He was an excellent horseman. And besides that, he was physically strong. He stood about 6'3", and they say he was immensely strong physically. He could take up a piece of iron in the contest they had at that time and heft it further than any of the men around. So he was a prize specimen, except for his teeth, which Nancy and I got. The poor guy, God gifted him with a good brain, a good strong body, but somewhere in the exchange, God forgot to give him good teeth. So here's an early children's visual aid illustrating the character of George Washington, the famous cherry tree. So that was imprinted upon me, I think, by my mother. She said, you know, Steve, she probably called me Stevie. Stevie, you know you're not supposed to lie. Our great George Washington, he could never tell a lie. I'm sure my eyes got real big wide. But anyhow, the point is, something has changed since all of our youth. Something has changed. And I got started on George Washington a while back. Do you remember that big controversy on that mural at San Francisco High School? I think it started around 2017, 19. So here's a portion of the mural that was painted along the stairway at San Francisco High. And well, like in this portion of it, I see black men working, I see white men working. Well, you got to understand, in my day-to-day dealings with leftists for a long time, at College of the Redwoods and in other environments, they would find fault with Jesus Christ. They would. They can find fault and have a hissy fit just like that. And that's what they did right here. So in this portion of the mural, I see in the background, illustrated by those white arrows, I see some natives. One blue coat is down, dead. The others have their arms raised up. So it looks like the Indians have spread blood. So it's because of this scene of the mirror, that dead Native American, that has caused different experts, like this one right here, Jessica Young, who focuses on memory in the literature of genocide. And she says these images and these controversial murals can be traumatizing over time. Okay? It can seem like I'm just walking into a building, but it's an accumulation of these things that can, I think, over time lead to traumatization. Cumulatively, they can lead to real harm. Okay? Well, golly, you know, these things were made, I think, around 1933. From 1933 to the end of the 60s, one of the most popular movie types were Westerns. how many cowboys and Indians got shot out of the saddle and blood all over the place, huh? I mean, this was common for Hollywood. And I also think about that, all these Hollywood types, they're always against guns, guns don't kill people. People kill people, all right?
Right.
I may differ on that aspect with some of you, but I've been a hunter since I was in high school. But this is the leftist mentality. Some of them wanted to make a big stink. Oh, look at that dead Indian there. Well, we can't have that traumatizing our students. So I got to thinking, and I said, you hear about all these drag queens reading to little kids in a public library. If you take a look at that guy on the right with the yellow hair, you get up close, that fella has more hair on his chest than I do. And his companion on the left, look at that beard. So young kids who are exposed to this and are not brought by their woke mothers, but just happen to stumble into a library and this is going on, are they immune to such in-person lesson confrontations of abnormality? This has got to be abnormal in their minds, right?
Yeah.
My mommy doesn't have hair on her chest, and that's supposed to be a woman, and then the thing next to her has a beard and is supposed to be, I'm lost. Dad, help me. I'm lost. What's going on? Oh man, double speak.
I'm traumatized.
Buzz.
Could you back up a slide?
Yeah.
Not that that isn't interesting in its own right.
Another one?
No, that's good
Okay.
right there. Thank you. I did some research recently for tours I'm conducting, and I had to make sure I had my facts straight on New Mexico. And the main combatants in the so-called Indian wars in New Mexico. And I'm talking about the 19th century. So you had the Jicarilla in the north, and you had the Mescalero in the south central mountains in the western Gila area. You had the Chiricahuas, and they were all Apaches. Okay. But I don't think what people don't understand when they throw around a word like genocide. Okay, genocide, if that's what you can call warfare, when one side loses in a big way, that was going on a long time before any of the white settlers showed up.
Yeah.
So the Apaches, in fact, if you think of them as like really fierce warriors, which they were completely thrown out of Texas by the Comanches. The Comanches were the real power in the Southwest. They were the strongest tribe, to the extent that an entire portion of the Apache Nation that lived in the panhandle of Texas, they were all killed. That's real genocide.
It is, and I'm glad you brought that up.
When these people throw around those terms, say it's genocide, and they broaden it out to make one generic group victims and one generic group oppressors, that's where the logic breaks down. Because, compare that to Hitler, where there was actual genocide going on. There isn't a comparison.
Indians, I'm part Native American. So I take no offense of this. It's history.
Yeah.
We can't forget history. But the thing is, since the 1600s, the Indians have been brutalizing one tribe after another. They've always been fighting. They always took scalps of other Indian nations. They burned some at the stake, just like they did the white people in New England. So, but anyhow, you tell me, if somebody's going to get traumatized by a drawing, hey, this is right in your face.
right,
That's
How about that, you know?
that's
that's
sad.
traumatizing me.
Yeah, that's
It's
bad.
traumatizing me too.
Is that what Nancy Pelosi refers to as San Francisco values?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna get to that. It is, actually, it truly is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It truly is. We have to tolerate that. We have to tolerate the public school system teaching that as a new normal. You do realize that.
Mhm.
Transgenderism is taught in public schools, and I'll get to that briefly, as a new normal. Well, I would not want any of my kids near it. I don't want any of my grandkids near it. So that's a problem. Anyhow, back to George. In the course of time, an army was formed. Now, this I put inaccurate. The troops never looked this good. You see all them spit and polished troops there with nice uniform. Yeah, nice uniform. Boy, they were a ragtag army if there ever was one. So I just took this off the internet to show George on his white horse. Okay. So then, anyhow, here's a famous quote concerning soldiers. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier, the sunshine patriot. And that was in December 1776, the American Crisis by Thomas Paine. So if you look at that real carefully, does that look like fun?
No.
You know, these men and Washington and his officers, they all endured that. That is tough. I mean, I've done winter camping in 2 or 3 feet of snow for maybe a week. Then I was able to go home, take a nice warm shower, and that was the end of it. They did this for months at a time during several winters of the war. So think about that when you start thinking of George Washington and the patriots who fought alongside him for our freedom and to help establish what I still think is one of the greatest nations the world has ever seen because of a number of things. Anyhow, this, of course, is a famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. Now, I believe the crossing may have started at 7 p.m. on December 25th due to severe snow sleet storm that troops did not arrive at Trenton until the morning of December 26th. So what's that tells you? All night long in this driving sleet and wind, those guys were on open boats, shoving aside these hunks of ice. Several men died of cold on the crossing. Those are no summer soldiers there. And we have to remember this. Boy, did they sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know? How many of you would want to go out, even if you're young, and endure that type of thing? You got to have a strong backbone to see it to the end and not bail out early. Anyhow, Washington had a good battle plan. He split his forces into 2 prongs as they approached Trenton, and they defeated these highly trained German Hessian troops. Okay, they took Trenton and Princeton. They later lost Philadelphia in 1777. That's when Washington moved his troops to Valley Forge. And all of you have always read about and know about, again, the suffering that the troops had to endure during that winter, right? Now, this is a painting of Washington praying at Valley Forge. These are facts of George Washington's Christian faith. Private prayer. Eyewitnesses reported that Washington would kneel for prayer with an open Bible morning and evening. 2, as president, he always supported prayer. He called for public days of prayer and fasting. Fasting. George Washington was a lifelong faithful attendee at Anglican churches in DC and Mount Vernon area. And I put this slide up here because it was not that long ago, 10 years, 20 years ago. We had this whole slurry of books written by these Ivy League so-called historians. They come out with books like titled, "Oh, America was not founded upon Christian principles." There were no Christians among the early founders. I mean, they were so bold as to, weave their whole story. Oh no, it's malarkey to think some of the early founders of our country were actually Christians. If you look into it, and there's this one historian, David Barton, he spells it out. There were a whole bunch of Christians in the early founding of our country. So, and George Washington was adamantly opposed to politicians enriching themselves while in office. Oh, you're gonna laugh here in a minute. And maybe some of you will cry, shed a tear. I could possibly do that. He did not accept the salary as the commander-in-chief of the Continental Army for those 8+ long years. He didn't want to even accept the salary for his 2 terms as president. The Congress forced him to. They thought that if he rejected the salary, this would set a bad precedent. So he took the salary, took no salary. He itemized his expense accounts during the war. He submitted that to Congress, and I think they paid him.
How ironic we put his face on the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, George Washington, he was a rich, I guess you would say, plantation owner in his day. Over many, many years, he owned about 4 or 5 farms. And I put some of the dates. The 80% of those farms were before he ever entered public service. Even when he was a 2-term president, I think it was only like about 3 times or so that he actually left DC to go manage something that had come up on his farms. Most of the time he had a foreman who did all the managerial work when he was off at war, when he was in DC trying to run the country. He did his job. He didn't advocate to the beach for 40% of the presidency like our recent president did. And that's factual. So here's a grand old lady herself. Nancy Pelosi entered Congress in 1987. She and her husband reported a stock portfolio valued around $630,000. 2004, her net worth was $74 million. Today, her net worth is $280 million. A return of almost 17,000%. And members make $174,000 a year. Oh my gosh, I tell you. Because of her, and I think she's probably at the very top, but Republicans have done this. Democrats have dipped in the pool or whatever, they've enriched themselves over the years. But boy, she has to take the cake. I mean, that's such an enormous amount.
I think,
They're trying to put forth the Pelosi law where politicians will not trade in stocks. I think that's a very good idea, right?
They're still trying.
They're
it
still
won't,
trying.
it won't pass.
It won't.
We can only hope, we can only pray, right?
Stock traders have to vote it into action then.
Right.
Yeah. But this is another thing about Miss Nancy Pelosi that really, really bothers my soul. Because I saw her, these words came out of her mouth. I want all of America to have San Francisco values. Oh my heavens. I can't think of anything worse, people. San Francisco values? Oh, give me a break. Anyhow, see, old George, he was a visionary farmer. I hope someday or another we shall become a storehouse and granary for the world. See, at that time, what America had was land. It had good soil in places. We had timber, so we could raise crops. We could cut down trees. A lot of our early timber was shipped over to Britain to use for building their ships, commercial ships, and probably warships, right? He was a farmer. He loved his farm. He loved it so much. In fact, I can truly say I had rather be at Mount Vernon with a friend or two about me than to be attended at the seat of government by the officers of state and the representatives of every power in Europe. He didn't want to hobnob with the elites. Huh? That wasn't his character. He didn't want to go out parading around like some peacock and have everybody look at him and say, "Oh, there's a great George Washington." He wasn't in for that. He was a man who probably would walk into the back porch of Mount Vernon with cow manure on his shoes. Okay? I can relate to this. There's my dear wife and I in our younger years. That's a 20-year-old Blue Moon trailer we called home for 4 years until I built a room addition in front of it. I didn't really have the expertise or the money to build a standalone house. So I added to it a room addition. I thought it was pretty decent. Other people may have had other ideas. But this was the best time of our lives, and this was BK, before kids.
Yep.
That's why we had time to spend on it. I worked so hard. And I gotta tell you, life was rich. Financially, we were poor. So, I didn't preface this. You may laugh at this, but if you remember some of the lines of Oklahoma, I'm pretty sure that's the scene for that guy saying, "Oh, what a beautiful morning, oh, what a beautiful day." When I would wake up on our little 3-acre mini farm in Tomé, New Mexico, it was with such exuberance that I'd go out of that old beat up trailer and smell that fresh air. And then to me, and I think my wife, we would go through a barn and there'd be horse manure around, cow manure around, goat manure. That was perfume, people. You like the smell, that is perfume. Really and truly, I have no problem with the smell. Anyhow, so this is the front of the Mount Vernon mansion. There's the rear faces the Potomac. Washington had his own fishery, made money from that. That was this is a recreated garden for Washington had at the time for the house and slaves. He was the architect of this famous 16-sided treading barn where they would run horses along the top with a bunch of oat, rye, seed heads, and separate, the seeds from the chaff. It fallen from between the cracks down below. He had his own mill. He had his own liquor distillery. And I had slides of that. I just didn't include it. So I would recommend to all of you, if you ever get a chance, go visit Mount Vernon, Monticello, and Williamsburg. If you like history, if you're proud of your country's founding, you want to go back in those times and get a sense of it. What a vacation. Oh, well, I was going to say, do you know who else was a man devoted to the land? Right there. Right there, Mr. Ronald Reagan himself. He loved to be there at his ranch just like Washington liked to be. That was what gave him his happies. It really did. I read some on Reagan, and that made his day, and lest we forget, Reagan almost died from assassin's bullet, right?
Yeah.
So here's a timeline, look at here. He had 22 years of tough public service, George Washington. Remember those years at the bottom, they're important. I don't see anything wrong with the traditional values or thanking God for the blessings He's given to me, my family, and others that we know. You know, and I know all of you feel the same way too. So here's some snippets of the shifting of traditional biblical values that has taken place in our country over the last 20 years and is accelerating. So here are pictures of the tolerant left, right? These people are so tolerant. They believe in civil discourse, don't they? They don't believe in violence. So January 20th, 2017, the first Trump term. The one thing about these elites, these big time Democrat Party politicians, a lot of them well educated. A lot of them gone to the Ivy Leagues, okay, and they have learned things from these schools. And unfortunately, so many young people today are learning things from these elitist schools that are really contrary, I believe, to what George Washington was all about and what the ethos, the beginning ethos of what our country was supposed to be about. Because look at this slogan, not my president. I remember when I first heard that, I thought, oh my gosh. Not my president. Oh boy, that's a catcher. That's an ear eye catcher, not my president. And I felt bad about that. So as soon as Trump enters his second term, so all again, we have these socialist eggheads thinking up slogans, no kings. No kings in the USA. Boy, they come up with catchy key.
May I say, in Washington's time, in revolutionary times, there was a logo and sayings that
Yeah.
pervaded the colonists. And it was a skull and crossbones. And above the skull and crossbones was a golden crown that seemed to float above it. And the saying that went under it was, no kings but Christ.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know if that portion of that was borrowed, plagiarized, whatever in modern times, but how ironic. You go from Washington's times with no kings but Christ to
You know what?
the no kings we experience today.
You know what my theory on that is, Mark? Some overeducated student who lives in his parents' basement went to Burger King. He gave him one of those paper golden crowns. And all of a sudden he came up with the idea, oh, no kings. Oh boy, look, we can even buy these by the thousand from Burger King. That's my theory. Because you know the type of person I'm talking about, right? They have never left their parents' basement. So I ask you this question here. Look, here are the last two Democrat presidents. Smiling Biden and Barack Obama. You know, when those guys got elected, did you read on the news anywhere in our country where these white supremacist Republicans, middle of the road Republicans are rioting in all the big cities,
Nope.
smashing windows?
Nope.
Did you guys ever catch one headline on that? I don't believe I ever did, and I'm a news watcher.
There
So-
weren't any after Charlie Kirk either.
Yeah. Why is that? Why is that? It's because these socialist, Democrats, cultural Marxists, they just didn't give Trump a chance from the very beginning.
Right.
You know, instead the Democrats tried to impeach Trump twice. Now, all those bogus charges have since been discarded. Think of all the time and money spent on trying to remove Trump from office.
Yeah.
And it was all based on lies. I remember during those two impeachments, I remember Nancy Pelosi walking with his pillow with those articles in impeachment like they were the last testament of Jesus Christ or something really precious. She had it in her hands, and all these train of Democrats were following them. It's like some English royal ceremony, I tell you. I've seen that with my own eyes. But when you think of all the effort they went to based on lies, and it didn't work. So Trump was not even elected, and a sniper's bullet just missed him by inches to keep him out of office. Now, there's a term here, lawfare. It's right at the top. Lawfare. If that's a term you haven't heard before, remember it, because that's exactly what's been going on in our country. And what's so insidious about this, if we got these two politicians, Letitia James and Alvin Braggs. And they came up with these frivolous lawsuits. Alvin, the man on the right, he actually got Trump convicted on 34 felony counts. Do you remember that?
Mhm.
34 felony counts. That woman on the left convicted him and made him liable for like $415 million in fines. Well, these cases have since been thrown into the garbage, but we shouldn't forget that. And the reason why we shouldn't especially forget Alvin Bragg's case, 34 felonies, do you know what they really wanted to do? This is what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
I kid you not. Number one, they wanted to prevent Trump from running for a second term, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they tried to do that in his first term. They tried to get him out of the White House. But this is what is so sad and insidious. And I believe this to my bones. And this is kind of my own opinion, my own self-reflection. I really do believe they wanted to put Trump in jail so he would die in jail.
Yeah.
I mean, those 34 felonies, that would have brought decades of prison time. He would have died in jail. So is this the type of country that we want our politicians? Are these the methodologies that we want our politicians to be pursuing just because the other party is in power? I don't think so. I think the vast majority of Americans, if they realize some of these things, they would agree. They would see a little bit of unity and not this divisiveness that so reeks over our country. But you remember that picture right there. They wanted Trump to die in jail. And now it starts all over again. All over again. That is Senator Kelly from Arizona. He's encouraging U.S. soldiers to disobey the chain of command orders. Boy, I just think that's so dangerous. We got military types in this church. After we leave here, if you catch them on a Sunday morning, why don't you ask them about that? Why don't you ask them their opinion of that? And if they think that's the right way to go in any situation. Now, just this morning, Wednesday morning, the senator from Virginia, Warner, Trump's Venezuela boat strikes fuel war crimes allegations. Are they legal? War crimes. Pete Hegseth accused of unambiguous war crime after new report. Okay. So now, their big push, Trump, Hegseth, And these Republicans, they're guilty of war crimes. You know, for the Democrats, isn't that a nice little tune, right? These are criminals. They're guilty of war crimes. We got to push that to the very end. Maybe though, that's an impeachable offense. So they're right back at it. They're trying to impeach Trump again. That's their game plan. Huh. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Show me where I'm wrong. Okay. So again, from this morning, Mark Warner says uniform. This is a different twist on it. Now pay attention to this. Mark Warner says uniform military may help save us from this president.
Oh,
A sitting senator from Virginia says, more or less, maybe our military will get Trump and again throw him in jail. What kind of evil is that? Because I showed Biden, Obama, they got into office, what those two men stood for goes against a lot of what we believe. We didn't do dirty tricks like that. So it's starting up all over again. And this time, it's all about that drug lord boat that was blown up off the coast of Venezuela. Gosh, uniform military may help us save us from Donald Trump. So we got two ex-military types here, at least maybe more, Mark and Buzz. I would call upon them, but I think their foul language would not be appropriate for this setting. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
So, one thing I think we overlook. I'm not saying Trump is perfect.
Yeah.
No way. No way. That guy sometimes, at least in his first term, he put his foot in his mouth a lot. He's gotten better at it.
A little bit better.
right.
Yeah,
He's still not perfect, but let's take a second. And these people who want to try and charge him and Seth with war crimes, look at his achievements. Was he not the one who was instrumental in bringing the hostages home?
Yeah.
Yes.
The tariffs,
Yeah.
holy cow! He's talking about giving every citizen of the United States $2,000 because of tariff money.
Yeah.
I know George Washington would have paid down the national debt for that.
I don't know if that's
I
good.
guarantee
That's
you
why
that.
inflation went up the last.
But
Yeah.
and then was it not Trump
Shut down.
on the upper right who pretty much put a stop to that Israel Hamas shedding of blood?
Yeah.
The peace is not perfect, but boy, you sure don't see the killing that was going on for the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
He's behind that. I looked at this. This is from the Supreme NATO General. Trump is the only person who can break Russia-Ukraine deadlock, says NATO leader. That's the Supreme General of NATO. Trump is the only person. Well, let me see here. Wasn't Russia-Ukraine war, wasn't that during 2 terms of Biden's presidency?
Mhm.
Didn't it overlap?
Started it.
Did he do anything to put a stop to it?
No.
Did he even try? Did he even go over to visit the Ukraine or Russia? I don't believe he did.
I think he said stop.
And look at what Putin is saying. Trump is the only one who can bring this to closure. Now, boy, if there was ever something that could totally spiral out of control, is that war right there. In fact, in the last couple of days, Putin is saying, come on, Europe, you want to start something, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Have you all read that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm ready. Bring it on. Bring it on, Europe. So the nukes will fly then. Anyhow, illegal invasion. Holy cow, when Biden opened the borders, do you remember these caravans crossing Mexico with tens of thousands of illegal people from countries all over the world? Oh, I was gonna make a note of this. I read this, took it off the internet. The official United States foreign population stands at 53 million. Is some census. Golly, and a lot of these people are on welfare, from prisons, mental institutions. I don't know if 53 million, can it really be that high? And some of you would have fact checked me, I thought it was an easy 30, 35 million, but 53 million, wow. So again, we're quite aware on Thanksgiving Day that Afghan lunatic who drove from Washington State all the way to DC to kill those two beautiful soldiers.
Second one done.
No.
Man,
second one's still living.
man, that is so sad. That young girl was 20 years old, just
The second
about
one's
out of
still
high school.
He's doing well.
BLM. I ask you, every time something the Black community thinks they have been trespassed against, they riot. They burn down their own neighborhoods. I just wonder, what would Martin Luther King say about that? He was always for non-violence. I credit him so much for making all those protests in the 60s. They were non-violent, I believe. And that was because of him. Oh yeah, now these three women, they formed that slogan, BLM. Black Lives Matter. Gosh, how can you argue against that? Isn't that what we all believe? As Christians? Do not Black Lives Matter? In fact, it got so intense in different circles. If you said white lives matter, you were accused of being a racist. Did you know that?
Even if you said all lives
I-
matter.
All lives matter.
You go in a Democratic Party and you say, all lives matter. White lives matter too. Is that not true? You'd probably be stoned to death, right? What a catcher. BLM, Black Lives Matter. Well, those women right there, they got rich.
Yeah.
Where did all that $90 million go to? I think about 60 million they spent on themselves
Oh, yeah.
and stuff like that. And they're being hauled before the IRS. We'll see what eventually happens there. And of course, this is, oh my,
Yep.
October 9th,
Yeah.
when Hamas stormed across the border and they slaughtered civilians, women, children, men. And then what are we doing in our, I think Satan is in control here. I really do. In this day and age, especially after the Holocaust, especially after Hamas storming the borders, slaughtering all those innocent, mostly young people. And you got people in this country and all over Europe protesting for Hamas, an organization that in its bylaws calls for the extermination of the Jews. It's black and white. It's right there in their charter. Exterminate the Jews. We're not no two-state solution for us. We exterminate. No two-state solution. And these people are protesting for it. And here's another slogan, from the river to the sea.
Yeah.
That's a call for genocide. That is a call for genocide, from the river to the sea, free Palestine.
And most of them don't even know what that means.
Exactly. And I'll be coming to that here in a minute. So could it happen again? You see in that lower middle picture, that is Hamas soldier with an automatic rifle firing at, I would assume, innocent people, civilians for sure. On the right is a picture of inmates at a Nazi concentration camp. And then down below, coming from Metaxas, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And this is part that is tough. I may rub some of our church friends the wrong way. God will not hold us guiltless. That's tough. That's tough right there, huh? That really is. So here we go. This is Columbia University. It has a $16 billion endowment.
Mm.
It's also the academic home of this guy on the left, Mahmoud Mamdani. That's his boy over there on the right, the new mayor of New York City. I call him the man with the perpetual chipmunk smile. He's always smiling. He is always smiling. He looks like a chipmunk, at least to me. I'm not trying to be derogatory, I mean, it's just a little reflection. But listen, look at that sign. Welcome to the People's University for Palestine. Hamas is calling for the extermination of the Jews. That's genocide. Our best and brightest go to Columbia, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and they hold these demonstrations to exterminate the Jews. What's the matter? Now this one right here, how to tell if you're dealing with a leftist. I got that off the internet. I marked through terrorist. I don't totally agree with that. I don't think the young Mahmoud is a terrorist yet. He's certainly no friend of Israel. But here's how you can tell if you're dealing with a leftist. And most of the time, these guys are so brainwashed. Once you figure this out, you might as well walk away. They won't listen to you. They won't. I've been there. I've done that. They will not listen. Number one, they will promote transgender ideology unequivocally. They will support abortion to 9 months and beyond. Think California.
Think New Mexico.
Yeah, I know.
Mexico.
That's sad. That's sad. And then they will support Hamas over Israel 24/7. So anyhow, these are biblical passages that, transgender ideology. Gee, I guess God made a mistake when it
God
says
doesn't make mistakes.
when he says he made them male and female. Well, he must have made a mistake according to these people who back transgender ideology, right? Shedding of innocent blood. You guys are familiar with this. What's more innocent than a child of a mother's womb? The shedding of innocent blood. And we all have to remember, biblically, Israel is God's chosen people. You better be careful. Here's some Democratic socialists, sitting members of a Congress. Two of these people, to be accurate, may have termed out, but they were there, and these are all socialists. So there you go. So again, what motivated Metaxas is that he sees the Democratic Party has been taken over by radical leftists. That bottom right hand, San Francisco Democratic Socialist of America. Oh, there's Nancy Pelosi City, and that's what she wants to have all over our country. Go think. Okay, education. Did you know the NEA has 3 million members? And some uncovered documents show this summer or this fall, they're going to give all their union people guidelines and to assist young people with gender transition. They call conservatives the devil. Isn't insane asylum. So this is what Nancy Pelosi wants for our entire country. You see all them so-called women? Those are all men.
Oh,
Yeah, I
Oh,
kid you not.
geez.
So every one of them is a man, masquerading as a woman. So again, you expose this to young minds, and you say this is okay. If you're against this, you're a bigot, you're a homophobe, you're a transphobe. You can't think wrongly of this stuff. Well, I beg to differ. Because I too believe God doesn't make mistakes. No. So look at this top one, Generation Z. Is it true that 23% of them identify as some form of LGBT person? That's a Gallup poll I haven't had the time to fully research that. Can it be 23%? Because if it is, this is copycat behavior.
They're
Because if you-
indoctrinated.
exactly, and if you repeat a lie enough times, will become to believe it. Don't say anything about transgender people. That is bigotry in its highest form. So see, Charlie Kirk was a missionary. He brought biblical moral teachings to thousands of wayward college students. Those red arrows right there. This is the campus where he was shot. That's his beautiful wife, Erica. 2 young kids without a father. Shot by an assassin on a rooftop. Oh man, where's all this? What party is all this violence coming from? Who are these people? And to what party do they associate themselves with? They dang sure don't associate themselves with the Republican Party. So now remember the Johnson Amendment? Right here in Albuquerque, I would recommend to you. You guys probably heard of Skip Heitzig and Calvary West, right? Well, on YouTube. I'm a fan of YouTube. That's an inside joke. Some of these guys know I'm a fan of YouTube. He has a sermon on the transgender lie. Watch it. Palestine Explained. See, I think Skip, I talked to him a couple of years ago. At that time, he would never have done anything like this. I can assure you, he never would have gone here.
I'm jealous. According to the Transgender Lie YouTube link there, he's gonna give a 46-minute sermon. You think I could give a 46-minute sermon in this
no.
place?
Yeah, well,
They're looking at their watches.
That's that's part of what I'm talking. Why I'm here. So down below, hey, YouTube, just Google Skip Calvary. You'll find those. In fact, over the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, he has like 4 or 5 sermons under this title, Monsters in the Closet. These are 2 out of it. And he does a really finesse job of tackling these 2 topics, okay? I think you'll be highly pleased that, again, he's not condemning all the Democrats to hell, nor the transgender people, but he is pointing out God's way. And I think that's good. Down below is Helen Joyce. She's a British UK medical researcher. And all these hormones and everything that they're giving these kids, some in the public schools behind their parents' back, she labels as child abuse. And I agree. So here's an area I could speak from personally, having taught at the college level. The colleges and the universities, as some of you know this, they're Trojan horse in this country. Columbia has like an $18 billion endowment. Yale has like a 35 million. And I think Harvard's like up to $50 billion. And look at this right here. This is something that should open up your eyeballs. Our very own UNM.
Yeah, I was just looking.
Our state budget is around $10.6 billion. UNM eats up 4.1 billion. APS about 2.5 billion.
And they're doing such a great job
Yeah,
of
exactly.
educating our kids for
Exactly.
that amount.
And in each state is similar. Higher education, K through 12, takes over 50% of the state budget. And we got kids in the East and the West, and I think here in New Mexico, because a higher rate of Native American and Hispanic students, they read and do math at a 30% proficiency level. Okay, educators should be able to handle that. But all this indoctrination, all this leftist indoctrination coming from these private and public colleges and universities, that's why all this, that's what all these kids demonstrating at these elite schools, that's where they get the ideas. From the river to the sea. Oh, that sounds so good. From the river to the sea. Okay, oh, here, okay. So since I'm talking about education, here, I'll share something personally with you.
Yeah,
Just.
I taught at College of the Redwoods a
Oh.
long time ago.
That's.
I was appointed the director of the honors program. Boy, did they make a mistake. Because I brought to the campus a creation evolution debate between Dr. Gish of ICR and this guy, Dr. Arthur Shapiro, which I came to know and in some respects really like. We had a beer or two off campus. And because at that time I was so naive, I thought this is a college, free speech. They ran me out of the college because of doing that. Why? They didn't want any opposing viewpoints to evolution. No, you can't do that here. So by the very fact that I had this debate to give the other side explaining scientifically the points, the evidence for creation, that was a big no-no. And they got rid of me. They weren't nice about it. Here, and then 40 years later, here's this young gal. Oklahoma. I always thought, Oklahoma, oh, what a beautiful morning. Isn't that a God-fearing state? I guess not. Because here at this university in Oklahoma, she was flunked by a TA for writing into a paper her Christian beliefs in gender. So, I don't think you can see it. This essay was worth like 50, maybe 50% of her grade. She got 0. And guess who the TA was?
Transgender.
It was a transgender person.
yeah.
Yes, it was. Look it up for yourself. Yeah, and in fact, if I'm not mistaken, let me see here. I forget what her major was. She was either going to be a counselor or doctor. But you can imagine, and then on my own personal things, I experienced the same thing. So after I got kicked out of CR, College of the Redwoods, I went to Humboldt State University, one of the premier state universities. And I wrote a paper, again, which exposed my Christian beliefs. And I got a 0 too. So I took that all the way to the president. I talked to him. I probably threatened him with a lawsuit. So the best they could do is they expunged that class out of my record so it wouldn't show an F. Did they do anything to the biases of the instructor? No. It was a woman, a feminist woman, and she was high in the ranks of the popular professors on campus. So they had to expunge that course from my record, or I would have had a total F on my record. So, okay, again, I ask you, what political party members are behind all these riots and everything? I think you know the answer. So here are possible ways for action. You can educate yourself and community. There are a bunch of really good books out there. The Progressive Miseducation of America, Corey Miller. That's a good one. Science and Faith, for those of you who are into science. Archaeology Associates for Biblical Research. If you have a high schooler, a grandchild, Hillsdale College is one of the best places they can go to. And that Ratio Christi is Corey Miller's group. So what Metaxas is saying, we got to push back against those who rob us of our traditional Christian values writ large, and it's our Christian duty. That's the big thing. It's our Christian duty to push back. And in this day and age, we don't have to fear any repercussions from the IRS. You remember this? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. I tell you, I think JFK would be a Republican these days, you know, I do.
Yeah.
What a great saying. How many of those people in DC do you think they have that at the forefront of their mind? Honestly, honestly. They're there for their country. I don't think, not like JFK. I don't believe they do. I think he spoke that from his heart. So, and again, I said, this is not mission drift. This is no mission drift to talk about these things, to educate one another. I came forth to you because I know some of this stuff. Some of you may know more than I do. Some of you may know less. I hope I've challenged you to, hey, why don't you start reading some good books? Talk to one another. Discernment, we sure gotta have discernment. You know, the Washington Post, the New York Times. At one time I thought the New York Times, that was a paper. Boy, it's a propaganda rag for the Democratic Socialist. So you gotta remember this too, and we're gonna be closing here real soon. You ever hear of the big lie? Well, it could very well have originated within the Third Reich, because it pretty much comes out of the 1933 edition of Hitler's Mein Kampf. And this is what more or less it says. The great masses of people will more easily fall victim to a big lie if repeated often enough.
Yeah.
And then John 8:44 on the devil. He is a liar and the father of lies. Connect those two, especially with Hitler, right? If he wasn't a devil incarnate, I can't think of many other men, maybe Stalin, right? So how does this come about? Censorship and groupthink. See, this is what the big lie, this is how it goes. It starts with one person with a megaphone telling a lie. And then it just crescendos through the months, through the year, through repetition, and these people cloaked with some type of authority, right? Some type of authority. So I don't have any confidence in that. I cannot tell a lie. George Washington. We need more George Washingtons in this day and age. So this is what I'm going to end in. I wanted to call this to your attention. So out of all those years, you know, after George Washington finally retired from public service in 1797, you look, he died in 1799 at the age of 69.
Wow.
Here is a man who loved his farm, who loved the country, who loved improving the soil to grow things for people, to make whiskey for men. Okay, he loved his land. He had less than 2 years to enjoy that. If that's not public sacrifice, I don't know what is. Do you? Huh?
Yeah.
Would any of us, when we were younger, would we even fashion the idea of spending the next 22 years of our lives until we were old, weak and frail, giving it to public service and then die within less than 2 years? That's why I think George Washington deserves to always have our respect. So there are numerous books out. If you Google George Washington, you might come up with George Washington Carver, a great Black scientist, educator, a really interesting biography of that man. So before Eric Metaxas, this is Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He won the 1970 Nobel Prize in Literature. He was a Russian. He gave a commencement address at Harvard, 78. Oh, they were silly for having him become the commencement speaker, just as those liberals have CR for appointing me the honors program director. Because he told all those highly educated elites, suggesting that the troubles facing the West were a result of forgetting God or turning their backs on him. Just like that. You know, right off the bat, he probably alienated 85% of the Harvard faculty, right? Because they don't believe in God. They don't have any absolute moral standards. As Christians, if we read our Bible, we have absolute moral standards. They're absolute because, in our opinion, in our personal life experience, they come from God.
Yeah.
They don't come from man. They come from God. That makes them absolute. Oh my heavens, I've read articles about how I think some of those faculty members slivered out of their seats and probably foamed at the mouth after he made those statements. Because forgetting God, turning their backs on him? What do you mean, turning their backs on God? There's no God. But you know, in Russia, Solzhenitsyn didn't have a Christian church to back him. We do. We've got churches all across the country. We just need to get on the same page in a civil manner and do what's best for the country. That's all. And then Christ does call us to do our part. We participate in this. And I do believe what we cannot do, he will assist us so that his will be done. We have a great helper. We need to reach out to God in prayer and the Bible and guidance, and he'll help us. So all I'm saying is this is a good time to start having discussion. This is a good time to start thinking about some of these things. Educate your kids, your grandkids, your friends, and just by all means, always remember, this is not mission drift. This is not anti-biblical. It's what we should be doing. I'm not saying everybody's so different. I'm not saying everybody. God's given us all different gifts. Some people have the gift of charity, of helping the homeless. We all got different gifts. But by golly, if you think you have an interest or a gift in preserving the greatest nation on this planet as a Christian nation, a nation with Christian values, a nation with good moral ethics, you might want to become involved, right? That's all. That's what Metaxas didn't want us to become like another pre-Weimar Germany with Hitler on the ascension. We have time to self-correct the course, so that's all. That's it.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.